All right. Well, Milian, thank you so much for inviting us. And we've been listening in on the conversation. What fascinating conversation has been going on. We're going to change pace a little bit, talk about organizations and agility. So I'm Amy Cates, everyone, joining you from New York. My colleague, Billy Carberry, joins us from North Carolina. And we're organization designers. Our clients come to us to match their organization to their strategy, facing challenges around growth and innovation, cost and productivity, mergers and acquisitions, and we work with across industries. The big giants, Google's and Microsoft, legacy companies such as Ford and PepsiCo, but also startups and the portfolio companies in the PE world. And over 30 years that I've been in the business, I've co-authored 5 books on the topic that you can see there. Built a boutique firm with Greg Kessler, which in 2020 was acquired by Accenture. And then over the past 4 years, I've been focused on building 150 global practice for Accenture in organization design. And Billy Carberry is one of the stars in that practice, and we've had the chance to work together and write together over the last couple of years. So what I want to do is, not sure what that red line is across everything, but we'll ignore that.
So it might help if you just it's somebody or drew. I don't know if it's accidentally, but if you stop sharing and then share again, it'll go away. It's like one of those things in Zoom.
Ah,
Okay, we'll do that.
I think X'd out there. Um, so we have a new book coming out and in March, and relevant because Billy is the author of one of the chapters on how to achieve enterprise agility. And we're going to talk to you about what that means and how you do it in a very practical way. I don't think there's anybody working today who has been thinking more deeply about how companies can be both big and fast and designed for that than Billy. Um, so let's just talk before we get into the particulars. What do we mean by organization design and what that lens really refers to? Um, we use Jay Galbraith's STAR model. Many of you may be familiar with it, which is the whole idea of taking a holistic view to diagnose and shape human behavior at scale. We firmly believe if you want flow, if you want speed, a nimble and responsive organization, if you want agility in its broadest sense, you need to intentionally design the system in which people work. And what we're going to share with you in the next 40 minutes is what we know to be true about shaping human behavior at scale, which is surprisingly predictable across time, across cultures, across industries, and even through waves of technology. So we'll not be making any predictions about how AI is going to change work organizations. We believe that much of what we're going to share is actually universally consistent, and will prove to continue to be important over the coming years, which are going to certainly bring a lot of change. So STAR model, the idea of start with strategy, capabilities, what do we need to do well together? Think team of teams, and then we create a system of structure, power dynamics, processes, decisions. I think there's a lot of great conversation about value streams and workflow. In the past couple of conversations, metrics and rewards, so important, of aligning internal motivations with bigger strategies, and of course our people practices. And we believe that a dynamic system that is intentionally shaped, assessed, and reconfigured is the work of leadership that allows teams at all levels to thrive in the organization. So what do our clients, when they come to us as org designers, mean when they talk about agility and they say our organization needs to be more agile? Usually they are feeling a set of external forces, either the need to become more customer centric, to digitize legacy businesses, to get greater scale and find value out of standardization, integration, platforms, more common ways of work that remove variation that's not adding any value to the customer. and then also being able to sense the environment, becoming more adaptive and responsive and resilient. There's a set of internal forces, because we work with so many companies that are incredibly successful, but also were built at a different time. And if we just click forward, those internal forces usually are about unrewarded complexity. It's just too many layers, too many people trying to do the same thing, overlapping, not clear about, I think someone, maybe Matthew, around boundaries and work. There's the handoffs are certainly not invisible. We have siloed decisions and information flows. Biggest complaint that we get is things are slow. We're not fast enough. We can't innovate, change, be responsive in a way that is competitive, and there's frustration. And I think this last conversation talked a lot about it at an individual level around what accountability means and how people need to feel empowered. So with that, let me turn it over to Billy to provide some really practical insights into how we go about creating organizations that can be both big and fast, focusing on one particular topic, which is really how to make the inevitable matrix work. Over to you, Billy.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Billy Carberry. I really appreciate the introduction, Amy. Very generous of you. My name is Billy Carberry. I'm a senior manager in our Accenture operating model and organization design practice, and I'm based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, very cold and windy Charlotte, North Carolina. Very excited about being here today, very humbled to be among the speakers that are on the agenda. I think very highly of several of them, and love their work and use it in our own practice as well. So very, very excited to be here today and to talk to you about this. So Amy talked about the external and internal forces that are at play. But what's the outcome, right? What are executives really looking to achieve? The outcome from in our point of view is enterprise agility. So what we're putting forward here is our perspective on what we think that actually means. And we definitely don't want this to be a 45-minute talk on definitions. I don't think anybody has the appetite for that. But I do think just spending a minute here just to ground us in some common thinking and some common language is going to be really important. We know some of these terms, Agile agility in particular, can be a bit problematic. So here is what we mean. Enterprise agility, the ability to deliver on today's business commitments while simultaneously building the business of the future, continuously sensing, adapting, and responding to changing markets, customer needs, and operating environments. And intrinsic in this, embedded in this, is this idea of continuous improvement, which is why I love some of the discussion from the panel earlier. I think that resonates with us very, very, very much, right? So here is one of our key insights. One of our key insights in working with clients on this topic of agility for quite a while now, right, is that enterprise agility is not just one thing, but it's actually the result of three other types of agility working together in concert with one another inside an organization. So that means, yes, there are different types of agility. And if our goal is really on the left, if that's the ultimate outcome, we have to be able to break it down into its component parts and address each one as a unique design challenge. So again, from our perspective, enterprise agility, not just one thing, but actually the result of portfolio agility, organization agility, and team agility working together as a connected system. Portfolio agility, the ability to make fast and decisive decisions, really at that portfolio level of the organization. Sometimes we call these the mega bets. Can we quickly and decisively assess what business are we in? Should we be looking to acquire a business or divest a business? How should we be managing our portfolio? These are portfolio level activities, but yes, it's also a type of agility. Organization agility, and from our point of view, is the ability to mobilize and manage networks of many small, distributed, multidisciplinary teams and other assets, and being able to really do that effectively, quickly, and easily across matrix designs that are becoming more and more complex, which we're going to discuss. And then team agility, and most of you here are experts here, and and we think this is obviously very, very important, but the propensity to treat the empowered team, often cross-functional, but the empowered team is the unique and fundamental unit of performance and value creation inside the organization, right? The ability of the organization to treat the team as the center and then ensure that all of the other layers are really in service of enabling and creating an effective system for those teams to thrive. So here's the big idea from our perspective about enterprise agility is that we cannot just address one layer if our goal is on the left. If our goal is on the left and it's really enterprise agility, we have to have capabilities across all three of these. It's not enough just to have capability in one of these areas. In each one of these things is a different design task. Amy talked about the STAR model. There are different configurations of the STAR model that address each one of these. A different set of stakeholders, and we've talked a lot about this today, the executives at the top, and then the teams of teams, and then the leaders of teams. And each one we also believe demands a different approach. We'll leave this with all of you. We're not gonna go through all the text in depth, but I think that we'll be sharing the materials either already or after the fact. And I think this will be helpful for folks, because what we're doing here is we're defining each of these layers of agility in more detail. We're talking about the stakeholders involved. And also, what problems would we be expecting to solve for here by type, by subtype? And we really find something like this is really effective when senior leaders talk to us about agility, because it's really, really important for us to be very clear about what it is that we're solving for. Therefore, we're making sure that as org designers, we're bringing the right intervention. So again, enterprise agility is the result of what we believe these three subtypes working in concert with one another. And again, we're gonna share these materials with you afterwards. All right, so Amy talked about the STAR model, right? It's kind of our mental model for how we shape human behavior and decision-making inside an organization, right? And we could, again, configure the STAR model very differently across those three layers, across those three types. And when it comes to designing for agility, there are implications across all of these points. There are many, many implications. I wish we had a whole day to talk about the shifts that's undergoing in organizations today around these STAR points in order to achieve an outcome like enterprise agility. And what we have on the right-hand side here are just a collection of some of the biggest ideas by STAR point, by lever that we have available to us as org designers: structure, process, metrics and incentives, and people practices. And for today's talk, for the remainder of the time that we have together, we're gonna zoom in particular on this one point, this structure point of the STAR model, the lever that we have around organizational structure and power dynamics in order to influence behavior and decision making. And within that category of structure, we're gonna specifically talk about the matrix and embracing the matrix, because we know that an effective matrix design is absolutely critical to enabling teams, removing complexity and removing conflict that adds no value. We know it's absolutely critical to create the conditions for high-performing teams and to create that organizational flexibility that we need to work more cross-boundary, more horizontally. The matrix is a critical enabler, but it's often not really well understood. So before we can actually configure a matrix, we really have to understand the four classic building blocks of organization design. There are four classic ways of organizing people in the simplest sense. One is by function, and not just what we typically call corporate functions like HR, finance, IT, legal, that exist in most, if not all, organizations. But we're also talking here about business functions, supply chain, operations, design, quality, engineering, right? Function is how Apple is organized at the highest levels. So if we look at their org chart, publicly available information, if you look at their org chart, you'll see the leaders who report directly into CEO Tim Cook are leaders of enterprise functions, business functions such as software engineering, hardware engineering, operations, quality. In a functional organization, people are grouped by like work and specialty area. It's great for career pathing. It's great for specialization. But not all organizations are organized that way at the highest levels. And actually, when organizations grow and become more complex, you'll typically see some of these other building blocks come into play. So geography. PepsiCo is a great example. There are obvious benefits to this, to organizing by geography, right? The ability to be hyper attentive to local tastes and local preferences, local realities on the ground. That's why PepsiCo organizes by geography. It's why Otis Elevator organizes by geography. Product. And in this sense, I really mean product-focused business units as we typically talk about the word business unit, lines of business. Carrier Corporation is a good example. They make HVAC equipment. They organize around commercial HVAC equipment. They organize around residential HVAC equipment, refrigeration equipment, fire and security. This is how they organize people using reporting relationships. And then customer groups, another way to organize people. Nike predominantly organizes by customer, really kind of customer persona. Citibank and other large banks do so as well. And oftentimes what you'll see in large financial institutions is that they'll organize predominantly by macro customer segment, consumer banking, corporate or investment banking, wealth management. That's how they group their resources and create boundaries and differentiation. So product and customer can be a little bit tricky, and I've been listening to the call so far, and I want to make a point of distinction, right? This is different than just being what we might call product-led or customer-centric. We're really talking about how we organize people in the matrix. And there are pros and cons with organizing by all of these building blocks. There are pros to take advantage of, and there are risks to mitigate with all of them. But in a matrix, we're usually going to find that one of these building blocks is going to be primary, even if we find multiple building blocks at play, which is really the definition of a matrix, one or more of these building blocks working together. So let's talk about how those building blocks actually work together. And we like to draw pictures. We draw pictures with our clients all the time to make things visible and make things visual and relatively easy to understand. And here's a good example. Organizations tend to begin relatively simple. Here's an example of a global logistics company. It's been around a long time. It's organized predominantly by geography. That had been the primary building block for quite a while, and very good reasons for this. The company had to have deep local knowledge of roads and networks and transportation infrastructure. They had to really prioritize strong relationships with local governments and local officials. Geography made sense. And this particular company, there were some global corporate functions, but really that power sat in the geographies. That's where the majority of the people reported into. That's where the accountability for the profit and loss, the P&L sat. And this is where control over many decisions sat, as well as control over resources in those verticals, in those vertical silos. It was the primary reporting structure. But like many organizations today, right, we start to see that over time, the strategy evolves, right? And especially true in today's environment with digital technologies and the imperative to be more digital and connected and the pace of business today, eventually the strategy becomes more complex as the company grows. The strategy becomes more multidimensional. And that was absolutely true in the case of this particular company as well. And in this example, the company's key for long-term growth, their primary growth strategy was to be able to actually, for the first time, manage a series of global product lines, which is, you might think is kind of interesting in a logistics company, right? That's so ground network based, but it was true. They were relying actually on developing a set of hardware and software devices that were going to be critical to their strategy, critical to their growth. And they wanted those new products that they were developing to have as much global applicability as possible across these geographic verticals. So soon, the company found itself with 1, 2, 3 global product lines. I think I maybe hit the copy paste button too quickly there because it should be A, B, and C, not A, B, and B. You always realize things for the first time when you actually present it, right? So again, the goal here was that they were actually for the first time going to be managing global products from the corporate center across those geographic boundaries. And as the company grew further, so too did the importance of managing global customers. So for the first time, they now had global customers that just didn't sit in one geography, but actually spanned all of them. And IKEA was a good example. Like IKEA, who may be European based, but actually had operations in all of these areas and purchased and interacted with this client across all 3 of these geographies, right? So now what do we see? Right now we see, fast forward a couple of years, the organization is not just geographically based anymore. We see almost every building block represented here. Multiple voices of the matrix at the table, like multiple voices to consider in decision making. So what we're really doing here, and trend is playing out across many organizations, if not all organizations, large organizations today, right? We're creating an increasingly interdependent matrix design. So I want to kind of connect back to what Amy was talking about earlier when she was talking about some of the problems that executives are looking to solve for today, the internal and external forces. Or what was at play here? This company was looking to become much more customer-centric. They wanted to redefine how customers interacted with their business and how the value that customers thought this company was delivering to them. They did not want to just be seen as a commodity anymore. They wanted to be seen as a partner, and that was a very important part of their strategy. For the first time, they were looking to develop global product lines and leverage their scale. And those were also, for the first time, very highly digital products as well. We've talked a lot in the session already, especially in the last panel, about breaking down silos, and this was absolutely top of mind for their leadership team, right? They wanted to be able to more effectively and easily share best practices, share information, share data, share learnings, share assets across these traditional vertical silos, which had for a long time been very, very siloed, these geographies. They wanted to start breaking those down, right? So the company started to realize, as many leadership teams are starting to realize today, that in order to really achieve agility, they had to become more horizontal, right? They had to do more across these boundaries, across these verticals. And this is what we're seeing with so many organizations today, that increasingly value is created at the intersection of the matrix. Value is created across boundaries. You all, we might talk about creating global products, but you all have talked a lot about managing value streams, right? Or managing customer journeys, right? These are becoming increasingly cross-boundary. So why is this so important? Why is it that we chose to talk about this? Amy and I were really excited when we found out that the topic was org structure and teams, because this idea of the matrix kind of immediately came to our mind. And inside Accenture, Accenture, very large organization, great with technology, and we have many different experts and and not only agile, but also product-based, product-led ways of working. And we work with a lot of those SMEs a lot in our organization design practice, and we partner with them quite a lot. And what we hear and experience time and time again, right, is that it's the design of the matrix. It's the design of the underlying matrix that's one of the greatest enablers of success when it comes down to really empowering these cross-functional teams and getting them to work and really, really maximizing the value that they can create. A well-designed matrix is going to remove those sources of conflict and accountabilities and roles. It's going to remove those sources of complexity that just slows teams down. And this is obviously a very, very challenging thing to get right. It's very, very challenging. What we find time and time again is that companies will try to layer new ways of working on top of legacy matrix designs, and it can create a lot of confusion. Okay, here's what we know. This is what we want to share with you today. We want to share with you 5 design tasks that we prioritize as organization designers when it comes down to really making the matrix work for us rather than against us. How do we embrace the matrix? The first is being very clear about where we are creating intentional boundaries. And I think, Amy mentioned this earlier. Matthew, I think, did a great job today talking about, yes, the importance of boundaries, the importance of clear boundaries. Where do we need autonomy? Being clear about which building blocks we need to use to design the organization. So in this example of the logistics company, this company had to consider for the first time whether or not there was actually going to be a global product organization within its structure. For the first time, they had to consider whether or not there was going to be a global customer organization organized around their biggest customers, right? They realized they needed to formalize accountability for these activities and formalize accountabilities for these perspectives. They had to create some intentional boundaries, which you kind of see in the yellow boxes there. And then second, decide where in the organization it's going to pay to connect. So what types of problems? Where do we have really challenging, complex problems with uncertain outcomes, right? Not everyone, and Amy reminds me of this all the time, right? Not everyone in the organization needs to be working cross-functionally. Not everyone in the organization needs to be on a cross-functional team. We may want everyone to feel like they are on a team, but that doesn't mean that everybody needs to be collaborating at scale, right? Because we know collaboration also comes at a cost to the organization. It's not free. So that's why we are very clear about where it's going to pay to connect, what processes, what decisions do we expect people from products and customers and geographic regions and functions to get together to work through. 3 is role clarity. I might actually say extreme role clarity. And I think this is the most important thing. Because for the matrix to work, we have to be extremely clear about what these building blocks are going to do in the matrix. And maybe even I might say, go as far to say, clarity about what they will also not do. And this is more than just defining responsibilities amongst people on the team, people on a team, individuals on a team, although I feel that it scales well, right? We've talked a lot today already about zooming in and zooming out. Well, here we're zooming way out, way out and talking about the accountabilities of each of these building blocks of the matrix. So the logistics company, for example, what's the role of global products? What's the role now of the markets and how might accountabilities need to shift? Or what new accountabilities might we be creating? What's the role of the customer groups vis-a-vis the functions? So what we do often as org designers is we'll work with a leadership team and we'll put the accountabilities of these building blocks side by side on a particular page, and we'll work. Maybe ruthlessly is not the right word, but I think it evokes the right meaning. We'll work ruthlessly to say, where is there potential for overlap in these accountabilities? Where are there gaps in these accountabilities? Where are there gray areas? And we'll try to make it as clear as we possibly can. And it might not always be as clear as we want it to be, but we always try to get it to be much clearer, right? 4th, there are a few nodes in the matrix. There are a few nodes in the matrix where horizontals and verticals come together. We call them, maybe call it a node. In this particular example of the logistics company, that might be one product line that has a significant market opportunity in one particular country. This is where we tend to focus, not only in the design work, but also we want the organization to be positioned to focus in business as usual. This is where we want to create real alignment around plans, priorities, metrics, the leadership dynamics amongst the leaders that are sitting squarely in this node of the matrix. This is really, really important. It's what we call the business handshake. And another kind of big idea here around design task number 4 is that not all nodes of the matrix, right, are considered equal when it comes down to their growth potential and their ability to drive value for the organization and the customers. So we have to take a rather discretionary approach in saying, where is the opportunity to really drive value when the matrix comes together? And that's where we choose to spend our time. All right, fifth, I needed another page for this, so bear with me because I couldn't all fit it on one page. The 5th design task, 5 out of 5, is define a clear center of gravity in the organization. So we have to define which of these 4 building blocks the rest of the organization is in service of. You might be thinking kind of, well, what's the center of gravity in my organization? Can you tell? And why is this so important, right? This is so important because where the center of gravity is placed in the organization between these dimensions is going to directly shape how the organization is going to solve problems and make decisions. It's going to directly influence the answers to the questions. So for example, right? Why does it matter? Decisions like what customer segments are we targeting? What products are we developing? What do those products look like? What are the requirements for those products? How are we designing them? How much product customization is acceptable to us as an organization? What priorities are getting resourced in what order? Where are we placing our top talent? These decisions are really going to depend on which building block is really in the driver's seat, so to speak. So a geographically dominant company, a company whose center of gravity is towards the top here, is probably going to resolve these decisions much differently than a company that really indexes and tips towards products, for example. And sometimes this can involve a rather significant change in an organization that may have been organized one way for a long time, especially in some of these, really kind of industrial titans that we talked about on one of the previous pages, right? These large, complex organizations. This can be a major change. But there's no, we firmly believe this, there's no right or wrong answer to this question about where to drop the pin, so to speak, between these dimensions of the matrix, but we believe it has to be clear. So companies are going to reach different conclusions about where to place that center of gravity in the organization based on their strategy and based on the problems that they're looking to solve and based on the context. Where are they coming from? So for example, what we know publicly about Apple, right? Publicly available information, we know that their center of gravity are those business functions, engineering, design, supply chain, right? Of course, they're maybe the world's greatest product company, right? But they accomplish that by really emphasizing functional expertise in the matrix. Very interesting, right? And they have very specific reasons why they do this and why it supports their business model and why it supports their culture. the logistics company we talked about. Still decidedly, the center of gravity is geography. They are still a massive ground operation. They have to have incredible knowledge of local resources and local infrastructure. But now the trend is certainly pulling more towards products. But it's still clear. Amy and I worked with a retail bank last year. And it was very clear to their CEO and leadership team that the center of gravity were some prioritized customer segments. That was the lens through which they wanted to make big, high-value decisions in the organization. So not right or wrong, but fit for purpose. So again, we talk a lot these days around customer-centric strategies, becoming more product-led. Different companies will reach different conclusions for different reasons. It all goes back to the problems that we're solving for. What type of agility is really the most important that we intervene at? Where has the organization been coming from? Okay, so let's make this a little bit more practical. How do we actually do this? How does an organization leveraging org design decide where that center of gravity is? There are a couple of key things, key things that we can do. We have to take them in aggregate. What's the primary organizing logic? What's that building block that we see at the top of the organization? That's one way, not the only way, but one way. Where is the P&L placed? Where's the profit and loss go? We talked about this some of us were talking about this in the chat earlier, right? We're talking about the budgeting process, but my point here is wherever the P&L goes is going to be a major driver of behaviors in the organization, right? And what we find is that over proliferation of profit and losses throughout the organization adds to complexity that kills agility. Key roles. What key roles do we see in the hierarchy? Product roles? Geographic roles? When we look at the organization structure, we can usually tell. Business outcomes. What's on the executive dashboard? What are they measuring? What type of outcomes? Customer outcomes? Product outcomes? Functional outcomes? And last, but definitely not least here, decision authority. Where does it sit? Who gets to make the calls, right? When we get these perspectives, these four perspectives in the room to make high value decisions, if we can't agree after we all collaborate together with good data and insights, if we still can't reach a decision, where does the decision tip to? Again, another key indicator of where that center of gravity is. So I'll leave you with this again, 5 design tasks, and for this number 5 here, right? This fifth one about the center of gravity, you can go back to the STAR model, Jay Galbraith STAR model, and really think about the levers that we have available to figure out who is the organization really in service of. And we see a lot of this as an organization design task, and hopefully you all find that this is completely consistent with what so much of you are working on today and seeing perhaps just at a bigger scale, zoomed out to the max. But we're really excited and interested to get your perspective. And Amy, I will leave it to you to take us home here.
Billy, thank you. I'm actually responding to some of the great questions and comments in the chat. And I think, Milian, we'll have a time for a few questions. So let me offer that to you. We'll open it up in a moment. And really just to close this up, what's so important in organization design is that we don't think about it as a decision. One time, how do we change the organization? But it is really the work of leaders always thinking in different horizons. What are we organizing to? Just as we think about strategy, and it's not a static place. It's we don't ever get it right, and that's not the point, nor is there one perfect organization, but we are trying to create a system that helps people come to work and know where to put their energy, what kind of decisions to make, what are they accountable for? What are they empowered to do, so that they can actually go home at night and feel, hey, I contributed. and I know why, what my work means. And to us, that is really the power of thinking about the organization as a system. So just briefly, when we think about this, you can see here the process of it's a very much a design process, as we would design anything, and then also an activation. We don't use the word change management, implementation. Think about change right from the beginning. Implementation feels like a once and done kind of thing. And again, we think about organization design as a set of decisions, but then there is really the work of organization development and effectiveness that all goes into this sort of ongoing activation over time. So many of you may not be in a position of, designing organizations, but there are really things that we believe everyone in an organization can do to influence. And one is to bring data, what you see going on in the organization, to up to leadership, to help direct leadership or more senior leadership understand what are root causes of some of the symptoms, frictions, maybe the slowness, excess costs, customer dissatisfaction, or employee frustration. That's really very powerful. The second thing is to ask better questions. What we hope you got here is maybe a little more in-depth understanding of the matrix and the organization, so you can ask some of these questions that Billy talked about around what is the role of these two groups and how do we intend for them to work together? Do they have metrics that align and make it rational for people to collaborate, or do their metrics actually create friction that people have to overcome? So asking better questions is something anyone in the organization can do. And if you have the opportunity to actually influence a part of the organization, we always say, go where there is readiness. Not every part of the organization, every leader wants to change, but where if you are in a role in which you do some kind of org development, org effectiveness, human resource work, or you or an internal consultant around process or optimization, is find leaders where there's readiness and work with them to have impact. We find that is the best way to then influence other leaders to think more holistically about the system that they are creating for people to come to work to every day. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. Milian, how much time do we have for a question or two?
Few minutes maybe. So, but thank you. Yeah, it's I really appreciate different perspectives, different because I think we're dealing with this, and I think the reason that I organized these conferences is because I think we need to shine more light on organizational design and just start talking about it more, because I think we've been talking about teams and sub-optimizing. So I really appreciate you sharing your perspective on this and your experience and what you're dealing with, and especially in this context of what Billy was saying with larger organizations. So thank you. But yeah, let's open it up. I don't know. Last time I asked a few questions, so this time I'll try to maybe give other people a chance to ask a question. But we have a few minutes, and we can eat. Maybe we have Mary Lynn starts in about. Let me see here. Sorry, I think at 1. So 1:50. So we don't have a lot. We have 5 minutes. So maybe a question for a quick question and response, and then Mary Lynn is up next.
Well, we're waiting for a question. There's one in the chat there about the some of the materials. We through Milian will be making all the materials, the deck, available to everyone. We're very open source. We believe in sharing, and we want you to have access to this.
Yeah, great. Please drop it in the chat, and I'll also gather all those all of your presentations afterwards and upload and send them with the recordings. So.
Anything specific? Maybe there's an interesting one here.
Marissa just maybe Marissa just raised her hand, so let's get her. Yeah. Marissa.
Oh, Marissa. Oh, hi, Marissa. How are you?
Good. How are you? Nice to see you. I had a question. So a lot of the work that I do is in organizational development and specifically around strategic planning. And so people will spend months putting together a strategic plan to find alignment on what they want to do. My question for you is, when you take on these organization design projects, do you ever come across scenarios where people haven't done that extensive alignment work? And then do you take that time to do it with them, or do you dive straight into it? And how do you approach all of that as org designers?
Great question. And I'll give a response and then Billy, maybe you to add. Um, Star model starts with strategy because if, we say if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there. So what kind of organization do we need to design if we don't know what our strategy is? So for sure, we need something more than a goal. We're going to grow revenue 35%. That's not a strategy. We are not a strategy firm. But a lot of our work is what we would call strategy clarification, getting enough stakes in the ground, getting leaders to articulate what those capabilities, what do we need to be good at together? How are we better than our competitors? What are the muscles that we need to build that other firms who look like they have the same customers and similar products don't have? And that then gives us enough to start to design around. What's interesting is we often see companies get really wrapped around the axle in strategy, going around and around because it becomes very abstract. It can sometimes be helpful to do this work iteratively, some strategy work, and then start to think about, all right, well, what does that mean for the organization? And thinking about this idea of, again, the star model, when we think about structure and power and who's going to make decisions, that all of a sudden starts to raise strategic questions of clarity that might have not come before. So we think about this work often iteratively. We're not going to be telling our clients, well, we think you should go into that market, but we need to know what markets are you going to be in and what are you not going to pursue in order to start to think about the org. Billy, to add?
Amy, I think everything that you said there is spot on. I would say sometimes a client will be able to have that very well articulated. I would say it's probably more common in my experience that it's actually not, despite an enormous amount of money and time spent doing strategy, but it's often a roll up of plans rather than a real stake in the ground about what the company is going to do extremely well going forward. And at the beginning, and I'm doing this literally this afternoon. This is the job I have to do, is to try to help capture the strategy on a page, right? And some companies, again, are really good. Can they summarize the key choices that they've made on a page and say, do we all see it the same way? I think that's really, really important, because we can't just go on our strategy is to be customer centric, right? Because customer centric is we see this a lot. Customer centric is not a strategy, right? We have to dive further, like along which dimensions are we going to compete in order to be customer centric, right? That's what we need to know as org designers. And I love what Amy said about asking good questions. And often that's part of our role, is to help kickstart that behavior, is to ask good questions. What does it mean to be customer centric to you? And how will you compete and differentiate because of that? So thank you. Great question. And again, not a plan. That was a perfect question. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So AM, I know you have a question, but we're at time, so we will take a few minutes break, give Marilyn a little bit of time to set up here, and we'll start in a few minutes. So
Wonderful. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.